Samoa Joe faces his toughest test to date in Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner. Samoa Joe, the undefeated submission machine, gets taken down by Steiner. But quick to get back up to his feet is the X Division champion, Samoa Joe. The thing about Scott Steiner, you just look at him. He is a genetic freak. He'll say it about himself, but that is just the truth. He has muscles stacked on top of muscles and just takes down Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe kicking and trying to block Scott Steiner the best he can. Rope break being enforced. The last thing either of these men want is to be the one that makes the first wrong move in the match. That can be the difference maker. You want to be the one that sets the pace, not the one that's on the receiving end of it. And now they tie up collar and elbow. Meanwhile, it's Big Papa Pump sending the submission machine into the corner. The Samoan submission machine, might I add, launching Samoa Joe down with that hip toss. That is 280 pounds and just launched across the ring like nothing. Now that's an impressive feat of strength. Samoa Joe spitting in the face of Steiner. And that was the disrespect. And here we go. The Kawada kicks by Joe. Just rocking the life of Scott Steiner. Samoa Joe quickly picking up the pace. Great combo we just saw from Joe. And the crowd here in TNA fully behind Joe. What a counter. Where did Steiner pull that out of? That belly-to-belly suplex by Steiner and follows it up with a boot to Joe. And again, another boot to Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe had a nice flurry, only to be stopped in his tracks from that suplex by Scott Steiner. I gotta say, referee Rudy Charles truly has his hands full with this one. Oh! Nice counter by Joe, able to get the boot up at the perfect time. And just raking his boot, the bottom of his boot across the face. This is an act of humiliation. Steiner, a former world champion. Steiner has faced some of the greatest that this industry has to offer. And Samoa Joe, like a bulldozer, ramming right through Scott Steiner with that suicide dive to the outside onto the floor. You'd never think it, but Samoa Joe can do all things. A guy that size shouldn't be able to do the things that he can, but Samoa Joe can, and he will. Meanwhile, countering is Scott Steiner as he sends Samoa Joe face first into the steel steps. That's certainly a quick way to stop your opponent's momentum. Biggest arm, shortest fuse in professional wrestling. There's nobody quite like Scott Steiner. Now the question is, will Scott Steiner's short fuse come back to bite him? One for the cover. Quickly broke it just so he could do some push-ups. Big Papa Pump has turned this thing around. Every time you get a chance to look at those muscles of Scott Steiner, I feel like they get bigger and bigger every time. Scott Steiner quick to take a shortcut, driving a finger into the eye. Belly to belly slam. driving Joe into the mat. Again, taking a little time to showboat. Scott Steiner will never not take some time to showboat and flex his muscles for the crowd. It's just something that is a part of Scott Steiner. Scott Steiner looking to put away Samoa Joe. Driving Samoa Joe with the powerbomb and stacking up Joe. Wait. Triangle. And I mentioned being the submission machine. Samoa Joe could force Scott Steiner to tap. That would be a hell of a victory for Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe has to also remember to keep his shoulders off the mat while in the submission hold. He cannot afford to get himself pinned in the process of trying to put Scott Steiner out. Scott Steiner finds the bottom rope. That will force a rope break being enforced by referee Rudy Charles. And here come the jabs of the champion. Jiving and driving. And out the gate. Rapid like a machine gun. Sent into the corner, but countered with a Uranagi by Steiner. The power of Steiner again on display. The thing is, the undefeated streak of Samoa Joe is at stake. Samoa Joe has been impressive since arriving here in TNA. And that undefeated streak could come to an end at the hands of Big Papa Pump. I gotta say, there's no shame in that, though, being that Big Papa Pump is one of the toughest competitors in this sport. Tough as nails, muscles on muscles, as he brings the fight to Samoa Joe, fighting on the lower side of the entranceway area. Scott Steiner grabbing a steel chair. Steel chair in hand, ready to take a swinging. Referee Rudy Charles grabbing the chair, but gets pushed out of the way, which allowed Joe. And Joe with a right. Oh, but a clothesline. And the chair to the midsection, and Joe went spine first into the barricade. No. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. We're going to get this thing back in the ring. They're not going to call this as a disqualification. There's too much at stake. Referee Rudy Charles is beyond lenient here. Now we're at 6. Joe is still... How is Joe moving? He just got clocked in the skull with the chair. At 8... Joe isn't going to make it. What? Oh, my God. Joe, last second, makes it back into the ring. Samoa Joe slapping back, fighting. Where are you finding this? Where in the world does Samoa Joe find this? Inverted atomic drop by Joe. And a big boot. Follows up with a senton. I don't know where Samoa Joe is finding this, but it's impressive to say the least. Steiner counters. Uranagi driving Steiner into the mat. We saw that earlier from Steiner to Joe. Now Joe returning the favor. And a cheap thumb to the eye by Steiner. Steiner trying to lift up Joe. Joe counters with a bomb into the mat, but Scott Steiner just barely managing to get the shoulder up before the 3. Just a back and forth display of raw power and strength by both Samoa Joe and Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner. I have no idea who was going to get the better of this thing. And a clothesline, but it's like running into a brick wall. No movement there. Now this time it's Steiner who threw the arm up. Blocking through with Steiner. Ducked. Coquina clutch. And he's got it. The Coquina clutch. That rear naked choke by Samoa Joe could force Scott Steiner to tap. The end could be near for Scott Steiner as he slowly starts to fade. The blood rushes to the skull. The Coquina clutch is locked in deep. Steiner somehow doing what he can to fight out of it. I am absolutely amazed. The choke may be set, but Steiner fights out of it. Joe goes right back to it. Locked right back on target. But countered is Scott Steiner. It may have been low, but I don't think referee Rudy Charles saw it. Back elbows. Half and half suplex. Right on top of his head. Samoa Joe with a rough landing. This could be exactly what Scott Steiner is needed to put away Samoa Joe. And now it's time for the Steiner recliner to put away Samoa Joe. The end of the winning streak of Samoa Joe is in sight for Scott Steiner as Samoa Joe starts to fade. There's 1. Now 2. Wait just a minute. Samoa Joe fights back. What? Up on his shoulders. Driving Steiner up. Snap power slam. And that could do it. Samoa Joe has defeated Scott Steiner. The Samoan submission machine and the X Division champion, Samoa Joe, is still on top, still undefeated here in TNA. These two took each other to the absolute limit. No holding back, but on this very night, Samoa Joe bests Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner. Samoa Joe stands tall and better than ever. Congratulations to Samoa Joe.